Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you guys again. And I see everybody's on the camera, which is awesome. So today we're going to do a debrief on last week. Then we're going to talk about how CX connects with the employee experience. We'll also spend quite a bit of time today diving into the strategy side of things. And we have a couple of exercises there. Then we'll talk about KPIs. Now, like some of this stuff is like, this is developed in a way that's like really kind of intro level, but if your maturity is higher than what we're covering, we can dive deeper in our coaching session on any of the topics. So if you're ready for something a little bit more detailed or more in depth, that's where we can cover that, but also feel free to ask questions because we can also, I've got lots of time built in today for discussion as well. So we can kind of tackle it both ways. So to start, I just wanted to do a roundtable and, hear one kind of insight from everybody about, what was one insight or one key takeaway or action item that they will be taking forward as a result of what they learned last week. And I'll just start with on my list. So I have Jonathan's up first.
For me, I think just familiarization with journey mapping. That was my first time seeing it or doing it.
Okay.
So we dove in pretty hard right away. So I think, but it was really great experience and really interesting. So I'm definitely going to look more into that. I think it'd be a really helpful tool for me.
That's great. And I have 2 books here on journey mapping. I can send you guys the links, but they're quite detailed. Like these are really like, if you're wanting to really dive in and do journey mapping as a company. But this one's mapping experiences. And then there's this one, which is how hard is it to be your customer? And like, just as an example, the company that did this, they're a CX consultancy firm out of Minneapolis. And their customers, like they'll spend $100,000 US to do one journey map. Like they get really detailed and really granular. So really journey maps can be high level or really, really granular, really low level, kind of just depending on your needs and your maturity and, how impactful that work is going to be for you. But so there's these 2 books and I can bring like the books that I have here, I can bring them and lend them out too. So we've got the networking event later in June. So if anybody's interested, just let me know any of these books and I can bring them and just like lend them to you if you don't want to buy your own copy. So they're heavy, they're big ones. Awesome. So next on my list would be Janet. You're on mute.
I would say probably the journey mapping too. We've done a little bit of it here at work, but just starting it from like even before the customer even interacts with us in particular, but like all that preamble, like the research and the thought process was something that I didn't really know that was a good starting point of journey mapping, or that's like where a person should start.
That's great. Thank you, Janet. Yeah. Ralph?
Yeah, so I guess that I know of journey mapping. I haven't really done it as part of work. I sat in on a session with the province one time to do some journey mapping about a particular persona for a thing they were working on. But for me, I guess my insight was I'd, think about it, but not exactly laid it out in terms of our student experience in our space that I work in, their specific journey, and specifically where the ups and downs and where the downs are for them.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sylvie?
Yeah, I think I am kind of the same answer as Jonathan. I didn't really have any experience with journey mapping, so it was very interesting to really deep down, like dive in it and kind of understand it a little bit better. So it's some awesome tools that hopefully I'll be able to use with my team.
That's great. Oh, we've had a few more people join. Excellent. Man?
Hi, for me, it's all about the customer. So what we do is going back to satisfying our customers' experience to make it easier for everybody. And of course, journey mapping, just like the add that to, and learning from doing and looking at other people. Especially, I still remember Group 3. They came up with that fabulous in-store shopping experience for the customers there, and showing the emotions and how they felt throughout the process. It's awesome. Thank you.
That's great. So for anybody who's done the journey map already, I saw there was 4 there. You can take a second pass and go over it and look at it from the perspective of how well are you delivering each of those particular steps, and where are the pain points or moments of impact. So we know, say with SaaS, for example, onboarding is a moment of impact. And that's a chance to really set the stage for what the rest of the experience is going to be. So that would be a process you would maybe want to carve out and do a micro journey on. Or in retail, so Janet with Cabela's there, that whole piece between when they've checked out and they're waiting for their product to arrive is a moment of impact. And that's the part of a journey in the retail life cycle that the customers have the most uncertainty about. And that's an opportunity where some companies really take advantage of doing that really, really well to set the expectations with the customer to manage. Because one of the biggest questions that customers have at that point is around the shipping and when is it going to get there and stuff like that. So once you've done your journey map, you can then take a second pass and just assess how well you're doing and identify any areas where you could do a bit more work or identify quick wins. Jared?
Yeah, I would say again, like most other people, the journey mapping, I'm somewhat familiar with it, I guess, in a more of an informal process. I've sort of helped develop a registration system at one of my previous roles. And so familiar with sort of the process mapping, but really the journey mapping helped me to keep sort of that customer in mind and really understanding sort of their journey, because it might seem great from an admin side, but it's like, well, what about the customer who's actually going through this? Does it make sense for them? So it was really good to just have that tool and experience to it, but always sort of keeping that customer sort of at the forefront when you're designing things.
That's great. And if anybody's ever doing like facilitating this with like an internal group and you aren't able to have an actual customer there to represent the customer's perspective of the journey, tag people to wear a hat or something that's like, okay, I am participating as the customer. I'm stepping away from my functional role and what I think the process or the journey should be, and, put on that customer hat and really try to play the role of the customer. Jason?
Yeah, I've actually never used this before, so it's very new to me. But being in IT and constantly working on new processes for clients, etc., I can see how I can use this with the team to map things out before rolling it out to see, kind of figure out how the customer is going to react. So we can kind of tweak that, or to look at current processes and where there's gaps. And also as a training tool, it's like to make my team understand that during this, whether it's onboarding a new client or whatever it is, this is the type of things that the client is feeling and what they're expecting and where we can do better to make changes.
That's fabulous. Thanks, Jason. And finally, Catherine. I think she's the last one.
Hi, I wasn't here yesterday, but I managed to watch the recording a little bit and learned about, like everyone else, journey mapping. I haven't worked on this tool, like this is new to me as well. But I'm excited to learn more because I really think this tool will help us improve with our overall in our team, actually. So I'm excited to learn more about it.
That's great. And Catherine, we can always catch up on our coaching call about journey mapping a little bit more if you like.
For sure. Thank
Perfect. You. Okay. So let's move on. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to dive, just kind of like skim the surface on employee experience. And the reason why we're going to talk about employee experience today is that essentially the experience your customers have is the result of what is being delivered by your employees. And that should also then connect back to your brand promise. We're not really going to dive into brand because that's, very uniquely marketing and is often fairly well defined often. But what's less clear still, like from a maturity perspective with organizations, is this connection between the employee experience and customer experience. So we're going to spend a bit of time on that today. So essentially, in most cases, employees are the people who are delivering your customer experience. Sure, you're going to use technology to enable that, but it's your employees that are going to be programming it. They're going to be defining the process. And in a lot of cases, you're still going to have frontline employees who are interacting with your customers. And I use the word hero because you'll often see with organizations who are more immature on the customer experience strategy side of things, that there's a lot of hero behavior. And so when we had talked about customer experience last week, I said when they're low on the maturity, you'll see a lot of the hero behavior and a lot of inconsistent experiences across your customers. So if your feedback that you're getting in your surveys or through your Voice of the Customer program is really inconsistent or highlights, like shines the light on certain employees, but not on others, that's often representative of an area for improvement where you could spend some time redefining that strategy and then working on that connection with the employees and making sure that the employees are delivering the experience in a consistent, well-defined way. And so the employee experience essentially is exactly the same as customer experience. It's the journey that an employee takes while working for your organization. And it actually starts before they begin working with you. It starts early on, just like a customer experience does, where it starts with the brand. So what sort of employment brand do you have in the market? And then they'll see the job postings or word of mouth. Word of mouth in small markets is very powerful when it comes to the employee experience. And then all the way through recruiting, onboarding in an employee experience is a moment of impact, but also is the recruitment process. And we're seeing that more and more, especially with the Great Resignation, is that organizations that have a really well-defined recruitment process and are really tuned into it and think about it from the potential employee perspective and how an employee is feeling at that point are really differentiating themselves and winning out in this talent race that exists right now. But so then the employee's experience continues through sort of like the standard journey or the standard middle piece, which would be performance reviews, how they are managed, how strategy, decisions, outcomes, results are all communicated, how the performance review is handled, and then either they'll split off into either a promotion or they'll leave. And those are also moments of impact, how a promotion is handled or how offboarding is handled. And to keep in mind, in either a promotion situation or an offboarding situation, how it's handled not only for that particular employee, but the rest of the team as well is important to consider. And that's all part of the employee experience. Whereas employee engagement is really the outcome. And that's what gets measured. And I bring this up because just like with customer experience and say customer success or customer service, those terms are being used interchangeably, but they actually mean different things. And employee satisfaction and employee engagement are different than employee experience. The employee engagement, the level of engagement is the result of the total experience. So a few just points of clarification. And it's really so important that employees see and understand what their role is in contributing to the delivery of that customer experience. They don't understand it. They don't understand why it's important or what they're supposed to deliver, how to deliver it consistently. If they aren't empowered to make decisions, that's all going to impact your customer experience. So no matter what your strategy is, your strategy and its success is dependent on how well it's executed or delivered by employees. And every employee has a connection to the customer's experience. So spending some time looking at those internal roles, the ones that aren't client facing, and ensuring that everybody on the team understands how their role contributes to the customer experience. So I like to suggest that every employee should have some sort of customer related metric or outcome, whatever it is you use, or if it's a goal, if you use in your performance reviews, but everybody should be measured in some way, shape, or form on the customer. And they should be able to say how what they are doing connects to the customer. And that may also mean a refresh on job descriptions and making sure that job descriptions for back office roles still speak to the role they play in helping deliver that customer experience, particularly if you want to become a customer-centric organization. So I'm going to just show you this. Just take a minute, not even, and just take a look and see if you can notice what the issue with this might be. Let's give you another 10 seconds. If you think you know, you can just like put up an emoji or something. Anybody figured it out? Okay, so this is a screenshot of an invoice that was used by Virgin, and it actually has the line that just says like payer deceased. I don't know what the double D stands for, but something like around the payment or the credit was denied because the payer was deceased. So this is a good example of where somebody in the back office, either on the IT side or on the finance side, was programming this and was just thinking about the functional element that they were trying to represent, as opposed to how it would be viewed by a customer. So you can imagine that when a family member or an executor of an estate receives this, and this is what they see, how they might feel, and what sorts of calls they might start to receive in the customer service department when this is the line item on the invoice. So just like this is just like a really great example that highlights that everybody, even if you're just programming something that's going to show up on an invoice or a bill, still impacts the customer. And so to be really mindful of that and making sure that, again, all employees can connect their role to the customer. Okay, so just a quick recap from last week. We talked about an experience having 3 elements, that it's accessible, functional, and emotional. And we're going to spend a little bit of time just chatting about the emotional component of it and how important that is. And really, more than anything, a customer is going to remember how they feel. So a buying decision is, depending on which research you're looking at, can be upwards of 80% irrational. Or what that means is 80% of the buying decision is made emotionally based on how they feel about the interactions they've had, or how they're internalizing your website, your marketing materials, all of that. And we know that each year that is increasing. And Walker, which is a customer experience consultancy in the US, did a study in late 2018, 2019 that showed that now, for the first time ever, the customer experience and how they feel is actually more important in the buying decision than the actual product or service. So the emotional, the experience, that is becoming increasingly important. And we could probably, it could probably use a refresh since COVID, but COVID has really changed the experience game in a lot of different ways. And it's upped the bar in terms of what customers are expecting, because there were some real innovations and some real disruptions that happened in the last 2 years. So now customer experience, the emotional side of it, is becoming more and more important. And most often, not always, but a lot of that emotional connection happens based on the interactions that your customers having with your employees. So thinking about how you recruit for those frontline roles, does how you recruit and the types of people you recruit align with the strategy that you've set for the experience, or is it mismatched? And in a lot of places it is mismatched. They aren't recruiting for the type of people that they need to deliver the type of experience they want to deliver. There are some brands that do a really great job of it. And we're going to dive into one of those brands a little bit later. And really, essentially, customers can tell. They're smart. They're intuitive people. They can tell when they aren't what's important to you. As a business, you really need to make sure that your customers know that they're important and that they feel it. And that the way you're designing your processes, your interactions are really, really in tune with the evolving needs of your customers and the evolving desires, as well as the evolving expectations. So as something evolves in the market from an experience perspective, it's going to start to impact the level of expectation that your customer has. So as you know, the Amazons and the Starbuckses evolve the experience that they're delivering, that becomes the new bar for all industries. And we aren't, as customers, and you can probably think about this yourselves, when you're thinking about what you expect from an interaction with a business, are you thinking about it relative to their competition, or are you thinking about it relative to the experience you had with any other business that could be completely dissimilar, but that's become what you've started to expect? Okay. So I want to spend a little bit of time chatting about customer centricity and, give you show you some methodologies on how you could start to build a more customer-centric organization. And simply put, being a customer-centric organization is really all about putting customers at the heart of everything you do. There's different ways you can do that, and it really needs to be across the entire organization to be a truly customer-centric business. And the benefits are significant. So beyond just it being increased, like you'll certainly see increased customer satisfaction, loyalty, revenue, profitability, sustainability, or even cost avoidance. Generally, and there's a lot of research that shows this, and there's studies that show businesses on like some of the Fortune 500 businesses and those that invest more on customer experience outperform their peers by a certain factor, and it depends on the industry that they're in. But in like SaaS, for example, so in software as a service, companies that invest heavily in customer experience can outperform their peers by a factor of 3. So there's a lot of benefits to becoming customer centric and having a really well-defined customer experience strategy. And really, being customer centric is more than just saying you are customer centric or you aspire to be customer centric. It's actually about designing and delivering and executing that customer centricity. I once worked for an organization that had set as its 3-year strategic plan that we would be customer centric. And it was one of, I don't know, say 5 different line items on the strategic plan or strategic imperatives. But there was no plan put in place. There were no resources allocated. And the view of the leadership at the time was just that if they divined it, it would happen. It doesn't work that way. You need to be very, very deliberate in defining what does customer centricity mean for your organization and how are you going to achieve it, and then putting resources, allocating resources in a project plan and all of that, just like you would do if you were implementing an IT product. You wouldn't just divine it to happen. You would have to be very deliberate with that. And so too, do you need to with customer centricity. So what do you see in this image? Feel free to go off mute.
Very comfy chair.
Very comfy chair. That's what most people see.
An empty chair.
Empty chair. So really, what it is a symbol. And this is Amazon's symbol for their customer. And so for Amazon, what they do is they always represent the customer in their meetings by having an empty chair, and it's symbolic, and it's to help them be mindful that the customer should be at the heart of all of their decisions, and that they really they've done a lot to change or disrupt the experience space with how they've designed how easy it is and how few clicks it is and how shipping can be free, and you get your ETA and your estimated delivery all through Amazon directly. But they've done that by always having the customer be at the center of their business. So thinking for each of your organizations, do you have a symbol? Do you have a way to represent the customer's perspective around the table? And what could that look like if you don't? Some organizations might just have something like a little kitschy, that they have like a little cartoon kind of toy thing that they can bring from meeting to meeting, or that sits in their meeting rooms. How can you do that in a hybrid work environment? Can you have like a Zoom background or something that has like a picture of the customer, your ideal customer? But just something, being really mindful of how you can deliberately bring the customer front and center into your meetings when you're having discussions or making decisions. Another idea is to repurpose this concept from mining, but they have a safety minute. So the mining companies in Saskatchewan, at least the ones that I've seen, they do these safety minutes at the beginning of every meeting, and it's every single meeting. And it's really to shine a light on how important safety is. So it might be something simple like, they're in a new location, so here's where the fire exits are. Or they might refresh on a safety policy so that everybody's aware of. But you could do the same with customers and have like a customer minute at the beginning of each of your meetings, where you showcase maybe a review that you got or something that you heard from an employee about a part of the customer journey. Whatever it is, you could just build in this minute. So culturally, everybody gets used to talking about the customer, and that will shift and evolve the conversations that you'll have over time. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, where you're sitting there and you're talking about a problem, or maybe you're hitting your numbers or something. And it's very easy to start to blame the customer and say, oh, it's their fault. They should be doing it this way. That it's designed a certain way. Like where you can kind of talk about your customers in a negative way. But if you start to build positive momentum around how people view customers and how you talk about them at every single meeting, that'll have a trickle down effect and will help you build more customer centricity. Here's one model of what a customer centric model could look like. You can Google it. There's others. I have the Gartner one up next, but essentially it's helping us understand that you need to do a lot of work and have it become fully integrated in your business. You need to map the customer journey. You need to continue to refine your business model. Maybe your business model in and of itself isn't all that customer centric. You need to review that. Align your technologies and processes to ensure that there's really looking at it from a customer perspective and are considered customer first in their design and execution. Engaging executives and leaders. This is probably your very first step, is making sure that you have leadership on board, and there should be one leader that owns customer experience. If nobody owns it or owns the strategy, has resources allocated to it, it's probably not going to be top of mind, because nobody's measured on it, and it's really difficult to continue to move that agenda forward. So making sure that there's at least one executive that has this as their top priority. Ensure that there's continued focus on the target areas or the behavior change that's required. Thinking about how to integrate all of those separate business units through your journey map. That's a great way to identify the the disconnects between business units. When you often in your journey map where you'll see pain points is when the handoff from one business unit or department to another. So making sure that they're integrated. And one way to do that is to have one person on each functional team that's kind of the CX rep that gets trained in what customer experience is, and then having a cross-functional customer experience tiger team or customer experience team that meets regularly to talk about customer experience. So even though you would have one leader that owns customer experience and probably has a team, depending on your organization, anywhere from 2 to 5, and think about the organizations here, 2 to 5 on their team, then still having representatives from each of the functional areas, and that will help you ensure that you're building a really strong cross-functional approach to customer experience. And then thinking about how you're going to transform it. And I try to always guide customers or clients on transformation and staying away from the word transformation, particularly when you're thinking about customer experience or customer centricity, because what happened or what was happening in the CX space, anywhere from 5 to 10 years ago, is companies were taking on these large transformation projects all around customer centricity, and the results were underwhelming. And that's because they were looking at it from like such a big macro level, and they had a hard time getting momentum because they were never done, because it's not something that you are ever done. But so the projects were being considered failures, and they weren't tackling it, like they weren't looking at it from a smaller quick win perspective. So identifying a series of smaller projects that you can deliver in a quarter or 2 quarters, where you can demonstrate results, gain some quick wins, gain some momentum. So have something delivered, done, and then move on to something else is much more attainable than trying to tackle it as like this big transformation project, and it becomes something that's overwhelming and people just never feel like it's being delivered. Just some guidance or something to consider there. And then also just considering what KPIs you have in place. And here's just another view of another way to look at customer centricity. Just a cartoon, just for fun. Well, I'll let you guys take a look at it while I get a drink. I love this cartoon simply because it just articulates how customer experience is so dependent on so many teams coming and working together. And it's not easy, but the companies that deliver a superb customer experience, they have this figured out. And I assume that, seeing as you're all here, that you aspire in some way to become more like this, or less like this. Okay, so let's dive into strategy. So essentially, when you're looking at your strategy, you want to know who your customers are. And we're not going to spend time today on the who piece. We're going to do personas and stuff next week. But you want to know who your customers are. You want to make sure you have a clear understanding of what they need from us or need from you. I have an example right now for us where I work, Gazelle AI. We have a very clear idea of what our product is. We know how we sell it. We know how we teach people to use it, but we don't actually know what they do with it. We know how we've taught them to use it, but we haven't spent a lot of time understanding how they actually use it. And we're seeing that's impacting our churn results. So our churn is higher than expected. And a lot of that is due to this gap in understanding of how they need to use it, and are we actually delivering a product that allows them to complete their job as they intend to complete it? And probably not. There's work for us to do there where we need to make sure that we're able to help them do more of their job. So it's important to think about what you're delivering from a perspective of not only what you want to deliver, but what do your customers need you to deliver, and what do they need to be successful? And then as we already talked about, making sure that everyone knows the role that they have to play in delivering that intended experience. And measurement is a really important part of it as well. We're going to just very briefly touch on it today, but in your coaching sessions, we can dive into that a lot at a much more granular level on a like organization by organization basis, because the measurement piece really depends on the systems and tools that you have in place and what you're able to track. Because I can tell you all the amazing things that you could be tracking, but you may only be able to track a certain couple of things at the moment. So we can talk about some different things that you could be tracking, but if you want to dive in further, that might be a good topic for coaching. And then we did talk quite a bit about people already. That's just another view of what contributes to a really strong strategy. And that's making sure that your business strategy and your business purpose are aligned with the experience that you're delivering and the strategy that you've defined for your customer experience. They all have to fit together. Okay, so this is just like a super simple strategy on a page. This is not meant to be an exhaustive customer experience strategy by any stretch of the imagination. It's more to help you get familiar with some of these concepts. And today we're going to spend our time looking at the strategy and tactics side of things. And so in this model, I just pulled in the kind of the top 6 things that are most important in customer experience. This may or may not be the 6 things that are most important in your business for your customers. Maybe your customers, there's another driver that's more important, in which case for your exercise, you could certainly swap it out for something else. Or if in your business you feel that a couple of these are too similar, that there isn't enough differentiation between the two, you could group them together. So this is just really to help expose you to these concepts, start thinking about the elements of a strategy. And this is just a tool that you'll have in your toolkit to help you in the future. And then next week we can look at the customer side of things or their persona side of things. So we are going to do a little brief exercise as a group to orient you to this. So just give me a second. Go in. So we're going to do an exercise in here later today where you guys can each start to build out your organization's strategy as it exists today. But for now, we are just going to get comfortable with the concept with a really simple example. I realize most of you are B2B. There's a few of you that are B2C. But we'll use a B2C example simply because it's a little bit easier in a group when we can, look at a brand that we're all somewhat familiar with. So what we will do is we are going to dive into this right side, the strategy side, by evaluating Starbucks. And then we'll do Tim Hortons. But if we want to just spend some time thinking about, so you guys can all come off mute and I'll pop the Post-its in and we can go through and just put out your ideas about what you think really makes up the Starbucks experience. And I'll kind of try to pop them in to the kind of closest category that they fit into.
So would lifestyle be something?
Okay, so what do you mean by lifestyle?
Just kind of like, I guess it's more branding, but if you're a Starbucks person, you kind of like fancier things, you like kind of always on the go type of person.
High end.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does nobody drink Starbucks?
It's good.
It's good. Okay. So really Starbucks likes to play in this personalization piece. So they use your name. It's highly customizable. I think it's probably the most customizable offering out there. Like literally you can like pick the number of pumps that you want, the type of milk, how much froth, how much heat. So they really play in that space. They also leverage your buying data to personalize offers. And you'll see I know a lot more about Starbucks than I do about Tim Hortons.
They give out free stuff on your birthday.
Yeah.
There's a rewards program.
That doesn't really fit in the category. I have the stars. So I would probably, in this case, like with them, I would add, like I would replace a section here. Let's call it like loyalty. Like their strategy is to drive like loyalty and high frequency. They want people coming in every day. That's what they try to build. When you get their offers, they're about habit creation. So I don't know how many of you have the Starbucks app or get these offers, but they'll often give you, they'll reward you for purchasing at a certain time of day. So I hardly ever purchase in the mornings. They were trying to create a habit with me of purchasing in the morning and like buying a morning coffee. And so one of the offers that they had was, you know, a reward if I made so many purchases before 11 a.m. You know, so they are trying to create habit.
Do they not also they like launch new drinks seasonally as well?
Yeah. So that's another piece I wanted to, talk about, like, and the difference between, say, Tim Hortons and Starbucks is that Starbucks has a strategy of leading in the experience space. Delivery and design. Whereas Tim Hortons is a follower. So Tim Hortons is a wait and see approach. They wait and see, like they waited a long time before building their app. They waited a long time before developing a loyalty program. They kind of wait and see what happens in the market. Tim Hortons is also a copycat. So from a product perspective, they copy what's working really well in the market from a competition perspective. So they copied Egg Bites to try to grab more of that breakfast share or that Starbucks share. So they have a copying strategy, whereas Starbucks has a lead strategy. So they'll lead with an innovation and Tim Hortons will copy. So that all kind of fits into the customer experience. And defining up front as an organization, are you going to be an innovator, a leader, a disruptor, or are you going to be a quick to market follow on? Like, are you going to see an innovation and quickly replicate? Or like Tim Hortons, they wait a long time actually before they build it. And that might be a function of maybe they're just not able to pivot that quickly or able to roll something out that quickly, but that's still strategy piece. So something to think about there.
Is there some sort of like strategy behind, like, because, okay, let's say like Starbucks comes out with like a fancy new drink that may or may not do well in the market. And then for the people who are like, I don't ever want to invest in Starbucks because it's too expensive. So they wait for Tim's to do the dupe version. And is that almost like a helpful strategy for Tim's to, like, if it fails, that's a failure on Starbucks, where it's like, if it does well, we can do a cheaper version that people will kind of jump on?
Yeah, and that certainly is like Tim Hortons strategy, is like waiting to see what works. They don't want to, I feel like the difference a little bit is fundamentally is Starbucks is willing to try something and fail and have it not fly. Although that rarely happens because they're so tuned into their customer and they have a ton of data. Like they're definitely a data enabled company. Whereas Tim Hortons is less willing to make those investments and not have them pan out. Although they are starting to explore, I think, a little bit more on that front, with like the recent, like the Justin Bieber collabs and stuff like that. So maybe they're shifting their strategy.
So would we add innovative to like brand
Yeah,
alignment
it doesn't really.
or personalization?
We could definitely have like another category instead of like. We could have another category, which is just so I'll just kind of put that with like brand alignment and up here because they're kind of all up here. Other things about Starbucks, like they recruit for fit, right? So they want people that are going to deliver the experience that they want to deliver, and they recruit based on that. Whereas, and they pay more. So they pay more in the market than a Tim Hortons does. And they're trying to attract a certain type of person. Has anybody ever had any issues trying to send back a drink at Starbucks? It's like no questions asked. Return policy, you could call it that. So they're highly responsive, easy. It could either fit under responsiveness or ease, effort, and time. And the mobile app was actually designed as a result of it taking too long for people to get their drinks. So how the mobile app was designed was because they would have people waiting outside the store, like the line would be so long that they challenged themselves to address that pain point of waiting in line. And that's how the mobile app came to be. It was so that people could order in advance and they wouldn't have so many people just standing in line, because the perception of a line also influences your decision about whether or not you're going to get a drink. So just think about it at the airport, because they don't use the mobile apps at most of the airports. I'll always wait in line at Starbucks for my stuff at the airport, because I'm super loyal and I much prefer Starbucks to Tim's. But a lot of people, they'll see the line and they'll go somewhere else. And that's the same for like a line at a drive-through. So. And the other thing that Starbucks does, they're very deliberate in their location selection. So I don't know if you've noticed this, that there tends to be a trend that the Starbucks are on a certain side of the street to make it easier for customers who are on their way downtown for work, or on their, like they've thought about the driving patterns of their customers and which way the traffic is going at the time of the day, which is like their busy time is the morning. And so the Starbucks are a lot of the times on the right side of the street, like for wherever the traffic pattern is going directionally planned. So. Okay, so I mean, that gives you an idea about the sorts of things that all kind of fit into strategy. We can just kind of add some others, like how would you define Tim's? I'll add in the ones that we've already talked about. So theirs is like a value purchase. Like they're really not tapping into the emotional side of it so much. They're not trying to have, like Starbucks is really, there's like that, the lifestyle, it's more expensive. It's more of a premium model, premium brand, which is what I was looking for. Whereas Tim Hortons is more of that value purchase.
Well, and both of them are looking for a consistent service, a consistent product between all stores. But that fits for both.
I find that the service is like hit and miss myself with, but
Well, at
I
least the
think they
product
struggle. Yeah.
would be, if you go to a
Yeah.
Tim's in Winnipeg or Toronto, the coffee and the donut should taste exactly the same.
I do feel like Tim Hortons has like been making more of an investment in the experience lately. They've gotten the app, they've done the loyalty program. Their speed has improved significantly. Oops, wrong one. So I feel like they've made a strategic decision to invest more in the experience.
And to add to that, I think they are trying to engage and connect with the younger audience as well, because they brought into Team Bits and Justin Bieber to advocate for their products, and so they're trying.
They do offer personalization, but not to the same level. What about the app or their loyalty program? Does anybody have had experience with that?
Not the loyalty program, but I guess like the roll-up contest.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they do have that. Yeah, they were probably leaders in the gamification side of things, like with McDonald's, but they were still a copycat, to be honest.
It's like Monopoly.
Yeah, it was a copycat, but in like the grand scheme of things, they were quick to follow on before gamification really took off. Okay, so.
And for a long time, they play into that loyalty with nationality. You're from Canada, and wherever you go in Europe, doesn't matter that, right? So they brought into those community and sponsoring different hockey events. Now they're doing like soccer. They're doing a bit more with the community, with the sport program.
Yeah, it's more like the everyday person as opposed to like. Great. So lots to think about in terms of, I just challenge you as you're, going through this to think about what's the difference between some of the other brands that you engage with regularly, whether it's your grocery stores, connecting these concepts on a personal level first, like building that understanding by thinking about it from a personal level helps to solidify your understanding as you move forward and try to apply this at the business level. And grocery, coffee, oil change, anything like to do with your car, all of those are great places to just, sit down and ask yourself some questions. I can't help it. I'm a geek, so I do it all the time. I've noticed some interesting changes, with grocery experience over the last couple of years, as well as Amazon's doing something that I don't really like. But I'm pretty sure that it's an experience play that they're doing to try to save money. And I don't know if you've noticed, but all the returns are going through Purolator or UPS now with Amazon. And the reason I think this is an experience thing is because, and it's going to be actually counterproductive for them, but they've made it too easy to do returns. And they're looking at a way to create more friction to reduce the number of returns. So when it was Canada Post, you could literally put your return in any mailbox, or there's like a Canada Post office, every 5 kilometers. Now they've shifted to UPS and Purolator to make it more difficult to do returns so that people will be less likely to return their product, which as an experienced professional, I don't like that. But cost-wise and strategy-wise, like it can be smart if you have a cost problem. So all that to say, no, I don't really like to talk about experience to make your experience worse or to create more friction. it goes both ways. You can design your experience in a way to create less friction, or in some cases, you could create more. Okay, so
Thinking about customer experience in terms of returning products or groceries, things like that, I'm sure many people can relate to the Costco experience. Sometimes I wonder like why they make it so easy for people to return products, even like half the eaten cake or something like that. And then maybe there's some way so that they think that, oh, we'll make it easier for you and we'll get you to pay more for other products and the whole thing there. But anyway, that's talking about grocery and more with Costco.
And that's a good segue into something else, and how I mentioned like connecting your experience to the business model. So actually Costco's business model is largely rooted on negotiating favorable payment terms with their suppliers. So they negotiate really long payment terms to then have cash flow that they reinvest. And so some of what they do is really like, it's considered loss leaders just to get people in the store. They don't like their experience. They haven't actually changed their experience very much at all over the years, because a big part of their business model is all about the financing piece of these products and getting the money in early and then reinvesting the money. I once had a presentation by a Costco executive, and it was really interesting, but they still, in terms of grocery, their profit margin is still higher. It's one of the highest in the grocery business compared to others in the grocery business. So yeah, they have a set or target profit margin as well for each of their products. And it's still higher than industry standard. So Costco is a really interesting business model to dive into if you ever get a chance. Okay, so now I'm going to give everybody like 15 minutes to build out your organization's experience. And if you want to do it based on, what you think the organization is trying to deliver, and you can color code it. If you think they're doing that piece really well, you could use green. And if it needs improvement, it could be yellow. And I have these set up, they're alphabetical. So like I have some assigned to everybody. So you can just kind of scroll around and find yours, like Jonathan's there is on the first one on the second row, but they're alphabetical. So you can just kind of scroll around. And I'll just keep everybody here. And if you have questions, you can just come off mute and ask that. So basically the same thing we just did for Starbucks and Tim Hortons, but for your organization. And you can change these headings. So if responsiveness, adaptability, or whatever, if that doesn't work, you can just change that heading to be something that's more aligned with, maybe you have like a real community focus, or any number of categories. Jonathan.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is based on assuming we know, but should these things usually be quite obvious if they're being done well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's part of why when you're trying to learn this concept, yeah, it's very intentional. And the homework is actually to go look at your competitor and experience it as a customer and try to define what you think their strategy is based on what you're experiencing.
Okay.
So it should be fairly obvious, and maybe there is no strategy, and if that's the case, then you could start to identify areas where you think you could focus on.
And this should be based on the company where we work for, right?
It doesn't absolutely have to be, but
yeah.
I try to give you guys the opportunity to then bring these concepts back into your role. But if you would feel more comfortable diving into another organization that you're more familiar with, then that's fine too.
Can I get the link for the? Thank you.
So some other headings, if you're finding that those headings don't fit, others could be memorable, surprise and delight. Like in education, for example, wanting it to be high impact or, something around the education component, high quality education. I think of who else we have on here. Also on education, there's often something around lifelong connection. So building that lifelong relationship so that then you can like maintain it as an alumni and starting to plant those seeds. So there might be a heading around long-term relationship, lifelong relationship, something like that. They're looking good. Okay, just a few minutes left. Is everybody good with that, or do people feel like they need more time or less time? Okay, I'll let the timer run out then. So 3 minutes. Okay, so just a final few seconds. You can always come back and finish this up. So, any thoughts on how that went? Is it helpful? Obviously, you might need more time.
Takes a while to get the juices flowing, I think.
Yeah. Sometimes it's even easier depending on your role to just not try to tackle it from like the whole organization. You could even just look at it like from a micro perspective. So like for me and my team, the Gazelle, our customer success team, I could very easily articulate our strategy for our team, but trying to define it across the whole organization, I feel it's disjointed. And so it would be very difficult to say exactly what the strategy is across multiple teams, because I feel like we have a lot of maturing to do from that, from that perspective of making sure that marketing and what they're putting out there connects to what sales is doing and what CS is doing. We kind of each do our own thing. We keep each other informed, but we haven't actually sat down and done some of the strategy work yet. So sometimes it's easier to define it based on your own unit or the micro perspective. Great. So keep plugging away, and then next week we'll be tackling personas. We may or may not come back into this tool to do the personas. There's a couple of different persona options. So, but you can always come back and add in kind of your ideal customer into here to help you build out the strategy. And then it's always nice to summarize it in a one sentence sort of summary, where you could say like your target experience statement and summarize it in one sentence. So like for us, for my team, it would be to deliver a high touch experience when and how the customer wants. And so everything we do is based on that, and we're very generous with our time. We have very limited bots implemented, and that's a strategic decision that we've made from a customer success or customer service perspective, is that we want to have like that high touch connection with our customers, because we know none of our competitors do that. So we want to differentiate on the service or the experience once they've signed and have joined us. So that's how I would summarize it in one sentence. You guys can feel free to go back in and put your one sentence summaries in for your strategies. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time chatting through the different metrics. And this is something that, like I mentioned before, is highly dependent on the tools that you have in place and the processes that you've defined in terms of your ability to define a metric that's relevant and aligned with your current level of maturity. But some of the different categories or areas where you could source customer experience related KPIs or metrics would be in your Voice of the Customer program. So Voice of the Customer program could be very anecdotal, which makes it difficult to have a KPI. But if it was anecdotal, you could simply do something like a summary of positive, neutral, or negative calls, reviews, if you don't have tools in place. So you could even just like set up something really basic to just track that. Reviews are a great source of metrics, and then you could assess them again, positive, neutral, negative. You could use sentiment analysis to do that, to just provide you kind of a pulse of how things are going. You could also just track like the number. A number isn't really like the number of completions. It's not a great metric, but if you're just very new to CX metrics, it does still provide you something to at least track. Like we track the number of reviews it's not a great metric because it doesn't actually tell me if it's positive. It doesn't give me any sense of health, but it's still something to make sure that we're at least getting a certain number of reviews, that we have a certain amount of feedback that we could then review and identify any areas of opportunity, things that we need to focus on. Then there's the surveys, which we've all seen, and we've all probably done NPS, which is the Net Promoter Score. And the NPS surveys, I don't super love them. I can't hide my bias because I find the question isn't always super relevant. So NPS is technically the likelihood to recommend. But the way that some organizations execute the NPS provides very little insight and makes it a not very meaningful metric. And it also confuses customers. So a kind of a common one you'll see is, what's your likelihood to recommend Sylvie, who was your customer service agent when you interacted, with whatever company? And who, like, customers are like, why would I ever recommend Sylvie? Like, I'm not going to go talk to my friends or my family or colleagues about the interaction I had with so-and-so. And often when you're assessing it at a frontline level, it's going to hide or camouflage what the real problem is. Because Sylvie might be very, very lovely to work with, but she's executing a policy that isn't very customer centric, and that's causing irritation and frustration for customers. So Sylvie might get a bad rating, but it's nothing to do with Sylvie. She's been perfectly polite, responsive, attentive, but she can't help the policies that she has to deliver on. So survey design is really important in making sure you choose the appropriate survey or question to solicit the right answer. So I always feel bad for those poor customer service agents that send me these like surveys after I've had a call with them and I wasn't able to get the answer I wanted. And I'm just hoping that their organization is mature enough to realize that it maybe wasn't their fault. So NPS is a little bit of a tricky one because true NPS is supposed to be worded in a certain way and it's supposed to be presented visually in a certain way. And it's also a very complex calculation. So people use it, organizations use it, but it isn't like the first one that I would necessarily go with. A customer sat or customer effort score is a lot more relevant and will probably give you not only a metric, but more relevant information to help in business decisions. There's also all sorts of financial metrics. So depending on your organization, it might be like net revenue retention or revenue growth. There could even be a cost savings one. Often CX programs will measure cost savings because a lot of times a project to improve a customer experience will actually reduce costs, either because you have labor costs that you're reducing, or maybe your returns, the number of returns you're getting are being reduced because you're providing more information on your website. So Janet, when we chat tomorrow, remind me to share some information about what Nike does to help manage their costs for their for online purchases. So there's all sorts of financial metrics, and those are good because everybody can kind of understand them. And most colleagues, like most of the colleagues around a leadership team table, are probably measured on financial metrics, and the tools or the processes are already in place to calculate them. The difficulty might be assigning a financial metric to a project that you've worked on. So making sure you take like your before measurement and your after measurement, and making sure that you can actually attribute it to the work that you're doing. So you have to think that through. But financial metrics are good. And to be honest, a big failing of customer experience has been that they haven't used enough financial related metrics. And so customer experience programs have had a hard time securing additional funding or additional investment over the years because they've relied solely on, say, NPS or CSAT or like survey scores to justify the work that they're doing. And it's very difficult to connect an NPS score to a financial metric if you haven't defined it at the beginning. And so making sure that if you are investing in a CX program, that you identify the financial metrics and are reporting on financials, because ultimately that's what your CFO and your CEO are going to care about most likely. And then you can also look at like other loyalty metrics, the number of times they're purchasing, how often is the frequency improving, depending on your business. If you're more B2B and you have a subscription rate, so maybe it's just, you know, your churn numbers. Are you improving your churn, the number of customers that are renewing for each month or each year? So you have to kind of define them just based on what your business is, but churn or loyalty is probably the positive way to look at it as opposed to churn. How many of your customers are you keeping as opposed to how many are you losing? Are all great metrics. And often the metrics that you have in CX are going to be metrics that other people have as well. And it's always good if you have metrics that others have, because then you can help them be successful and they can help you be successful because you are both measured on the same metric. I would just love to hear from those around the table. Do you have any customer experience metrics in place at the moment, and who would be accountable for those? Okay, what metrics could you implement? Like, what could be a metric that could matter and be relevant to your business that would help assess the health of your customer experience?
Actually, we do, because we have a grant where we have to do reporting on them every quarter or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head what all the things are, but there are things like a number of successful projects and things like that. Yeah.
Great.
I think a number of clients served, number of unique clients served, that kind of thing, I think.
Okay. Any others?
I run the customer service department within Johnston Group. So we do have a goal as a team to answer every call within a minute 30 of them waiting in the queue.
Okay.
We don't always get it. But that's our goal. So I guess would that be a metrics? I guess.
That's great. And I don't know if you have a metric for the completion time, but that's when I always guide on being careful about setting the completion time as the metric. So that's like for us, for my customer service team, we don't have a guideline for how quickly they complete or close the ticket. And the reason is we want to make sure that we're giving complete answers and that the customer is getting what they need from us. So we more measure how quickly we respond, but not if it takes 4 hours to close it, we don't close it prematurely. So making sure you've got the right metric to drive the right behavior is really important. So that's a great one. Now, what do you do at the city? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm kind of curious as a citizen as well.
Well, I'm the IT manager in community services department. So for just the service, we manage the library services, we manage the recreation services. So in terms of KPIs, perhaps I can add, we're looking for the number of transactions like people get to use the digital services that we have. For example, some of you might not know, but with the library card, you can have access to LinkedIn Learning, for example, and that is all paid for by the city, by your tax dollars. And so that is kind of $30 a month. And in addition to that, right, there's a lot of services like online music, movies, documentaries. So it's not just about books for library services anymore, but if you have, you can register for a call online and you can access those services. So we're looking for the number of transactions. And I think based on last year, we probably have about 1 million transactions in terms of using digital services in various services there. So some type of
That's great.
metrics that we're looking for,
So-
and we try to increase those transactions from the residents of Winnipeg.
So a great metric for digital services is doing like these little, they're called micro surveys. So if you have like, I don't know what chat service you offer, or integrating with another survey, where at the end of a transaction, you're asking, were you able to complete your intended task today, or the intended transaction, whatever wording makes the most sense. But making sure that what you're measuring is actually going to give you an indication of how helpful the digital process was. So were they able to complete it? Were they able to complete it? What was the ease that they were able, like how easy was it for them to complete that task? Because if you're always measuring transactions will likely continue to increase, and it might you might think that the health of what you're delivering is stronger than it actually is. So measuring that, but also with digital services is seeing where they're dropping. So if you have screen recordings, or if you can map the journey in your analytics tool to see what the conversion rate is from each step. So like step 1 to step 2 to step 3, and seeing what's the conversion rate. Let's say it's a 5-step process or 5-click process. How high is your conversion rate, and monitoring that so that you'll know if you have a problem somewhere in your journey. You'll see if they drop off. If it's a 50% drop off, let's say between step 2 and step 3, you know, you need to rework that part of the online journey. So some other things to think about there from a metrics perspective is making sure you're measuring, you know, the right things, the outcomes, less as opposed to just the transactions.
Thank you.
Anybody else that has any other insights or thoughts about what they're doing? No? Okay. That's great. Okay. So the homework for this week is always, you know, a suggestion, but I love doing an experience-based competitive analysis where I go in and I try to experience the product or the service as a customer would for one of my competitors. And that gives you insight into what they're doing, how they differentiate themselves, and maybe where your areas of opportunity are, especially if you know you're offering very well. You'll be like, oh, we do this better. Or, oh, you know what? That was awful there. How are we doing it here? Maybe I should double check here. So spending some time doing a CX-based competitive analysis, and you can either do it using the template I've provided, or if it makes more sense, I don't know how far you could get in the registration process of trying to become a new student somewhere else. Don't know how far you could get doing that, but you could, you know, for Cabela's, you could go and make an online purchase at one of the competitors, or, you know, go through that and see exactly how your customers might experience it with a competitor. And you can either use the template I provided or just take notes, and we can go over those together. But it's really fun to do that and to see what your competitors are offering. And if you don't have a competitor, if it's too difficult, just spend some time experiencing a product or a service and documenting it like we did today, to just help solidify what you've learned. And then again, you know, just 5 to 7 minutes. You'll have time once we've disconnected here to just take 5 to 7 minutes and just reflect on what you've learned today. Any takeaways, how it applies to you, your role, or your team. Feel free to share some highlights or insights with colleagues of yours, as well as I added one more video to the YouTube playlist. This one is about empathy, and it's just a great little video, and you can feel free to share this stuff with colleagues, anybody else who you think would find it relevant. And that is it for today. So before we close, I'd just like to do a quick roundtable and get your one word close for how today went. Oh, I guess I have to tell you who's going to go first. I was just all ready to take notes. I put my page over. Well, we'll go with Jonathan again. We'll go. Yeah.
It was thought provoking.
Great.
Oh, that's 2 words. Sorry.
Hyphenated is fine.
Yeah.
I'm not a stickler. Jason?
Interesting.
Okay. Jared? Did we lose Jared?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I would also echo interesting.
Okay. Ralph?
Okay, strategy.
Strategy. Janet?
I'd say enlightening.
At first I thought you said insane. And then like, oh, okay, that's different. Then Sylvie?
Insightful.
Catherine? Oh, I can't hear you if you said anything, Catherine. Okay.
Useful. Yeah.
Useful. Okay, great. Did I miss anybody? Nope. Okay, so we'll wrap up for the day. I think Shaylin just wanted to tee up the in-person event.
Yeah, so I know we had mentioned the last session will be more in person and there'll be sort of a networking component as well. So we have decided on a venue to host. So we'll be at our co-working space launch. It's just on Lombard Street in the Grain Exchange building. So I will be sending out another email today with the actual address and the details for that. If you could reply back, like I think I'm just going to send another calendar invite. And then if you can reply back, if you can attend or not, we're just going to work on arranging some refreshments for that event. So getting a pretty accurate count of who will actually be there will be great. And that one will be combined with both of the streams. So it will be everybody from today, as well as the smaller group that was yesterday as well.
Great. Well, good luck with your learning challenges. Feel free to email me directly if you have questions. And if you haven't already booked in for your one-on-one coaching, that'd be great. And Sylvie and Catherine, you're both from Johnston Group, and Ralph and Jonathan, if you want, you guys can combine and then have 2 sessions if you would prefer. Totally up to you. Yeah, I'll leave it there. And if you're interested in me bringing any books, like let me know what your topic is that you're interested in, and I'll like set some books aside to bring to lend out for the event. I have, I don't know, like a dozen or so customer experience books here. So yeah. Okay. Have a great week, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stay safe, everyone.